Well, I hope that everyone else had a much better weekend than Disney and the new Snow White film because things are not looking good whatsoever. When you get beat by an R rated, hammy Jason Statham movie, you're in a bad spot, Disney. So let's just go ahead and dig into it. Before we kick things off, per usual, make sure to hit that subscribe, the like, the comments, everything down below. Do that for us and visit criticless.com or download us in the Android and App stores. We're an entertainment reviewing platform, but that's not exactly what you came here for. You came here to hear about the box office and what happened to Snow White. And that's not all I have for you today, though, so I hope that all of you guys stick around for a little bit after that because I'm talking about Zack Snyder's new movie, which is definitely going to bristle some people if I were to guess, because a lot of people hate Zack Snyder. And then also Warner Brothers has sold the rights of a film that they have been working on, or well, have had in the can for a long time, and it's probably going to see the light of day when no one thought it would. But first off, with the box office, Snow White, things are not looking good at all. This movie got beat. Now, it didn't get totally stomped, but the thing is, in this kind of scenario, you can consider it getting stomped because the numbers here are that basically it was a 15.2 million to 14.2 million. So it only got beat by $1 million at the weekend box office, which is not a whole lot, but it is a huge, huge loss for only being the second weekend out in theaters for Snow White. And I mentioned earlier, how the redheaded stepchildren of YouTube have been predicting this because they have. The press around this film has been absolutely horrendous. It's had some of the worst press of any film that I have ever seen in my life. And people have even been wondering, like, oh, why is it so bad for this one compared to some of the others? Because because the actresses and people involved have been saying similar things that a lot of Disney films have been over the past few years. But the thing is, what you're missing here is that people have finally had enough, and the things that were said about this movie kept being said over and over. And then even on top of all of this, there is much more compounded controversy, considering the fact that we also have two leads with Gal Gadot and then the Snow White, who must not be named. They don't even talk to one another and are fighting and couldn't do press together, and is a very political scenario with this, which also hurts the movie a lot, which I will not get into. But if you look into it much at all, you'll find out the the politics surrounding Snow White, which affect people on all types of the political aisle. But all of that is just to point out that this movie did absolutely horrendously. This film should have done tens of millions of dollars, but instead they're only at 14.2 million on a second weekend. And like I said, this is going up against a hammy action movie with Jason Statham. If you've seen a Jason Statham movie, you've seen this one. Some gradient of it, some level of it. Now, if you were to look on Criticless, we are sitting at a 66%. Now, if you look at my score here, I gave it a 39% because I'm going to be completely honest, the movie's terrible. But at the same time, it's fun. Like now it's not so bad that it's good. It's still just bad. But like at the same time, I get why people are liking it. I get what they're enjoying it. It's a throwback action film. We've got some pretty high scores in here that blow me away, but still the scores are kind of all over the place, at least to some degree. So I obviously side with the boguses, and I think that's where it belongs. But none of this is to compare to Snow White, which we are currently sitting at 10%, which I think might be the lowest score of any reviewing site out there currently. And I think that this is beyond well-deserved. So that also plays a big part outside of all of the controversy, is just the simple fact that this was not true to form. This is not what people wanted from this character, and they do not like it. And it is just getting absolutely pummeled. I mean, literally, when some of the highest scores that you receive are 41%, that's a problem. That's not good. And that's where this movie has been hanging. And it just sounds like, by all accounts, even if at the very best of ratings, it's a mid, a decent, then you're in a bad spot. So the fact that this movie got just totally pummeled by a very totally different movie, and a rated R one at that is bad. And this film should have never been making this low of a dollar amount on a second weekend. So this is really going to have Disney and a lot of these studios reassess what is happening, which is what people have been wanting and have been asking for quite some time. And this is a wake-up call for Hollywood, which I think was extremely needed. So good on everybody for showing up for one and not the other. And I think that things like this are going to continue to happen if Disney just keeps putting out stuff that no one likes. Now, there were other films that came out this weekend with this unicorn film, The Death of a Unicorn, which is an A24 movie. But obviously, it's made on a slim budget, didn't get a ton of marketing, and so it didn't necessarily do gangbusters. But then we also had This Woman in the Yard horror film, which also didn't do super great, didn't cross 10 million. But both of these films, by the time it's all said and done, with at home sales when they come out and everything else, will probably end up at least making back what they have in it. Whereas this Snow White film, we haven't gotten, I don't think, a solid budget on it. But by all accounts, it is going to lose quite possibly hundreds of millions of dollars, which is insane. And so Disney is really going to be in a bad spot when this all comes out in the wash. And this movie was possibly even ought to have not even saw the light of day, and ought to have probably just been a tax write-off, which actually brings me to another tax write-off, which is with Warner Brothers. And essentially, there was a film that was made quite some time ago called Coyote versus Acme. A lot of people were really excited about it. And basically, Warner Brothers completely shelved it after being filmed, after being done. This is almost a Space Jam-esque type film, except for it's a legal drama comedy starring Wile E. Coyote. And basically, he finds a Better Call Saul style lawyer to defend him against the mega company of Acme, who makes faulty equipment and supplies for him to catch the Roadrunner. And so they're taking them to court. Supposedly, the movie was very good. It was very funny. And Warner Brothers just didn't want anything to do with it. They stuck it on the shelves, and a lot of people were saying that it was a tax write-off for that year. But Warner Brothers has finally decided to actually sell it. And who have they sold it to? Ketchup Entertainment, which is quite odd to say the least. Ketchup Entertainment has started kind of hitting people's radars, but they haven't put out anything that's done really, really well yet. They've had some decent sized creators involved with their movies, but they've not done anything that's done really great. And they just recently did a Hellboy remake, which didn't do well at all. But the news here is that it is being sold for $50 million. So that's an interesting thing where Ketchup Entertainment doesn't have anything really on the line outside of the $50 million. They didn't make it. They didn't have to pay the actors. They didn't have to do anything there. So all they've got to do is recoup that $50 million. And if people want to see this, if people still love the Looney Tunes characters, and if they can get enough of advertising behind this thing, and they're saying that it's going to hit theaters, then this could make that money back and do well. And at the very least, the Underdog is one here. People are getting to see a movie that was essentially never going to see the light of day, with a lot of big stars being attached to it, one of which being John Cena, who's apparently actually running the Acme Corporation. And then we have Will Forte actually playing the lawyer here. And so this sounds really fun and interesting. And there was even, as far as the directors go, Phil Lord, who did the Lego movie, is actually attached to this and who is directing it, and had some very harsh words to say about the fact that they had decided not to release this film. And it was kind of the same deal with Will Forte as well, because basically everyone said that the movie was great. So this didn't make sense. But this is great news. It looks like you're going to get a chance to see this movie at the very least on streaming, but it sounds like it's going to hit theaters. And hey, they got it for a $50 million spot here, and Warner Brothers made a little bit of money back, and maybe they still were able to write it off on taxes. I have no idea. I'm just glad that this is coming out. This is a big win for creators and for people involved, and for everybody who wanted to see this movie. Now, the last little piece of news here that I was going to talk about involves Zack Snyder. Now, you're either a Snyder bro or you're not, or you're just a regular person who doesn't understand all the drama or hate for Zack Snyder, and some of his movies you like and some of them you don't. But the news here is that he's ditching capes. He's ditching the sci-fi, and he's moving his way into UFC, which is very interesting. He's basically partnering with actual UFC, and they are going to be branded on this movie and completely attached to it. And then also, though, the interesting part here is that he's also going to be tied to the Saudi Arabia's General Entertainment Authority, and this guy Turkey, who is going to be involved with it, and he's helping them make the movie. So my guess is that somehow Saudi Arabia is going to play a role in this film. But apparently this guy was a big fan of Zack Snyder. He wanted him involved, and then kind of the same thing here for Dana White as well. And they think that he can give a good, gritty film that they want. And if you know anything about Zack Snyder and the movies he's done, being his Man of Steel, Justice League, all of those things, but also recently the Rebel Moon, movie. But if you're a fan of his older films like Watchmen and 300, those grittier films, it would make sense for him to be attached to something like this. And I don't totally hate him. I'm not a full-blown Snyder bro by any means, and I don't defend everything he does. If they end up saying that he is just directing this movie and he is not writing it, then I will be ecstatic. I will be very happy, and there's a good chance that this movie will be very, very good. So as long as he's not writing it, and they haven't said anything about that yet, then we can probably have higher hopes for how this is going to turn out. But this article is full of a lot of them kind of praising Zack Snyder and some of his movies and his vibe and his style and why they want him involved. And there are going to be people who have very strong opinions about this. But apparently the movie is about a guy who's rising from the rough streets of LA, a young fighter who gets a shot at a UFC championship, and he battles his inner demons as he fights for redemption. So, I mean, very, sports movie type of vibe. It sounds fairly stereotypical in that way, but hopefully the movie's good. I will be checking it out probably regardless because I watch most of what Zach does for good or for bad. But I think this sounds neat. And hey, a UFC movie could be cool. Maybe they'll get some other stars. My guess is they probably will, being that they are directly tied to this. So I think that all in all, this is good news. But the Snyder haters are probably going to be upset about this movie getting announced. And the last thing that I didn't say I was going to talk about, but I just want to touch on and how hilarious it is that Morgan Wallen was on SNL and he gave a full-blown Irish goodbye, just said nothing and walked off set. Normally, at the end of every SNL episode, people, they hug and kiss and they get all excited and dance and whatever at the end of every episode. I don't really watch much SNL, but that's what happens. And Morgan Wallen was the musical guest, and he decided that when they were doing that little bit, he was just going to separate from the squad and just saunter right off set there, which I think is absolutely hilarious and pretty fantastic. And I like Morgan Wallen, so good on you, dude. Just walk off, why not? Who cares? It's really, really funny, honestly. So yeah, that I just wanted to mention it. But guys, let me know down in the comments below what you think about the Warner Brothers news and them selling this movie, and if you plan on seeing Coyote versus Acme, the Zack Snyder stuff, and then obviously the big news that everyone is going to be talking about today, which is that Jason Statham's movie beat Snow White, which is pretty epic, is pretty awesome. Even though I wasn't crazy about A Working Man, it's got people attached to it that I want to support and I like. And right now, anybody that puts egg on Disney's face, I'm game for as well, because they've been screwing up a lot. And they made a movie that no one really liked or wanted to see. So there's that. Let me know all your thoughts below in those comments. Hit that subscribe button, and I will be back before you know it with more news or a review. And everybody take it easy. Later.